Like I was saying, welcome to SustainabilityxTalks, Protecting Blue Spaces, hosted by UBC WasteNauts and Sustainable Youth Canada, Montreal. My name is Sam Lotet, my pronouns are she, her, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that I, and I'm sure many of you, are currently situated in what is known as Canada, but many of us are likely on the traditional and unceded Indigenous lands. I'm in Montreal, which is on unceded Kanakahake or Mohawk territory, and many of our other hosts today are in Vancouver on the traditional unceded Coast Salish territory of the Musqueam First Nation. No matter where you're located, I invite you to find the unceded or treaty territory you're residing on and recognize the Indigenous people as the traditional custodians of the land and waters in which we live today. Since today's topic is water and blue spaces, I think it's essential that I also mention that here in Canada, there are 59 Indigenous communities who currently have a boil water advisory. And when we speak about water sustainability, I think it's imperative that we include Indigenous people in our conversation and continue to look to them for guidance in this issue.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. My name is Raiti and my pronouns are she, her. So I'm the team lead of the Recycled Paddleboard project at UBC WasteNauts, and I'm really excited to be actually hosting this event in collaboration with Sustainable Youth Canada, Montreal. And so the outline of this presentation will be the following. First, we will introduce our teams, and then we'll dive deeply into our goals and focus of each teams and what we've been kind of working on in the past year. And then we're very fortunate to have Dr. Corvalan from C-Smart with us today, who will give a presentation about her experiences protecting blue spaces. And after that, we'll have our panelist Q&A, where you can submit questions and have your questions answered by Dr. Corvalan. And we'll give our closing remarks and wrap up the event after that.
Awesome, thanks, Raiti. So hi, everyone. My name is Rain, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the VP Outreach Media here at UBC WasteNauts. And for those of you who don't know, WasteNauts is a multidisciplinary engineering design team, and our vision is to create a zero-waste future, ensuring a circular economy. And our mission is to have a creative and innovative team that turns waste into another valuable resource. So currently, we have 5 unique and innovative projects running. They all abide by the 3 pillars of sustainability, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to the Recycled Plastic Paddleboard sub-team that helped organize this amazing webinar today.
Great, thanks, Rain. Okay, so we'll just start with introductions. So as I've mentioned before, my name is Raiti and my pronouns are she, her. I'm the project lead at UBC WasteNauts for the Recycled Paddleboard sub-team. And when I first came up with the idea for this project, I was very happy to find very passionate and hardworking individuals who had the same mindset of working towards limiting plastics in the ocean as me. And I'm very happy to allow my team to introduce themselves.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Elise. My pronouns are she, her. I'm in my 2nd year of environmental engineering at UBC, and I'm part of Raiti's Recycle Paddleboard team.
Hi everyone. My name is Andrea. I'm a 4th year in environmental engineering, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi everyone. My name is Max. I'm a team member. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a 2nd year integrated engineering student.
Great, thanks guys. And when I first came up with the idea for this project, I really saw the demand for sustainable products within the paddleboarding industry through an initial survey that I did. And upon making the team, I was sure that the work and the time that we put into the project would be meaningful in helping create a more sustainable future.
Okay, so this project consists of building a paddleboard for recreational use made out of materials that will otherwise become trash and eventually enter our oceans, which is why, well, we focus mainly on plastic, since this is one of the hardest materials to recycle and it constitutes 80% of ocean debris. This project aims to keep disposed plastic from entering the oceans by giving it a second life.
So as for our goals for the project, Throughout the design, we aim to use sustainable materials wherever possible. We had originally intended to use fully reclaimed and melted HDPE plastic. However, this proved to be too heavy for us. So we decided to use wood and other kinds of plastic in tandem with the HDPE. We also aim to be able to hold an average size rider, and this would mean somewhere between 5 foot and about 6 foot, and around 100 pounds and 170 pounds. This is a broad range, but we found this range to include most of our stakeholders for the project. We also aim to have our design be innovative and interesting for beginners and pros alike. We don't want our product to just be usable for beginners and weekend warriors. We want to advocate for a more sustainable approach within the industry, as well as appeal to high performers.
Yeah, so our recycled paddleboard sub-team came together in September after WasteNauts recruitment, and that's when we began our initial research. So looking into things like the dimensions of paddleboards and existing methods of creating recycled paddleboards. Then we began our material research for the core. So we decided to mainly use HDPE, and we began creating CAD models of several potential core designs. We also researched materials used for the outer shell of the board, which is the part that wraps around the core. And after winter break, we started to design our fin, which you can see in the right photo at the bottom, as well as our paddle. We also did some stress testing on our cores to determine which would be the most sturdy and lightweight. So we ended up selecting the core on the left. And since we're not able to create our board this year, unfortunately, we're currently finishing up a written report on our design to be used in future design cycles. And of course, we're really excited to be hosting this event with SYC.
Thanks, Elise. I'm just here to introduce SYC Montreal. So Sustainable Youth Canada, SYC Montreal is an NGO that's led by a team of Montreal CEGEP and university students, and we're passionate about helping communities with environmental initiatives. We're a local branch of the nationwide SYC network, and our goal is to educate youth to be empowered to help their communities. We help youth have a positive influence by giving them guidance, resources, and motivation to carry through a diverse range of projects. We want youth to see that they can have a real impact on their surroundings. The directors of SYC began by advocating for their school, Dawson CEGEP, to implement composting with waste audits and citizen science. The students at their school worked together with the administration to successfully implement composting bins to help reduce the waste and their environmental impact. SYC is currently helping to implement composting in schools around Montreal, using this as an example as the impact the students can have in their own schools. We search to help communities directly, whether that be through rough policy recommendations, youth workshops, hosting an AI hackathon, gaining insight on environmental law in Quebec, or physically helping to clean up parks and forests in Montreal. Our overall goal is to simply connect communities to the resources they need to help them see real change. At SYC, we truly value teamwork and collaboration, which is why we're thrilled to be working with UBC WasteNauts today. This is a little insight into who is in our team, and if you look out into the Zoom audience, I'm sure you can see a few of them here with us today.
Awesome, thanks for the introduction, Sam. Now we will be introducing our panelists for today. So Dr. Paloma Corvalan is the programs manager at Sea Smart, which is a Vancouver-based charity that inspires people to love and protect our oceans. She creates and delivers programs that connects kids to nature and empower them to protect the environment. She's also the president of the Society for Canadian Women in Science and Technology. Now I will pass the floor on to Dr. Corvalan for her presentation.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Very excited to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. I'm here to teach you or tell you about protecting blue spaces. And I've got this presentation that I'm sharing up here. I'd just like to say a little bit about the structure of the presentation. I'm going to start off with some true or false questions, and I'd love for you all to participate by putting a reaction. The reaction button, you should be able to see it on the bottom right of your screen, and put a big thumbs up if you think something is true, and put any other reaction if you think it's false. So thumbs up for true, any other reaction for false. And after that, I am going to talk a little bit more about the threats our oceans are facing. Mention a few solutions at the end, especially things that we on an individual can really influence. And finally, ending with a bit of a resources slide, because there's so much to learn and I want you to go out and learn much more after today. This is going to be quite short. I might move a little bit fast, but we'll see how we go over the next 20-30 minutes. Okay, so the first question, oops. I'm just moving this over here. It's asking, our oceans cover 70% of our planet. If you think that's true, give me a thumbs up reaction. If you think it's false, put another one. All right. Yeah, seeing lots of thumbs up, maybe because you saw the next slide, but also, yes, our planet is covered 70% by the ocean. That's why we call planet Earth the blue planet. Water is so essential for us. And our oceans actually make up the majority of all the water we have, about 97.5%, which means our fresh water, which is where a lot of those pollutants are coming in, but also our drinking water is actually quite little amount in terms of the overall amount of water on Earth. All right, next one, what do you think? Do rainforests produce more oxygen than marine plants? Yes, they do, thumbs up, or no, they don't, any other reaction? Rainforests produce more oxygen than marine plants. Nice. Yeah, ooh, I see a few thumbs up. Cool, well, some of you are learning something new. It's false. So, our rainforests are super important. And, we say it's like the lungs of our planet in terms of, producing that oxygen, sequestering that carbon dioxide for us. But it's actually our marine plants, marine organisms, in the water that are producing most of the oxygen on Earth. So over 50%, the estimate being around 50 to 80%. And not only that, it's also a huge carbon sink. So our oceans are so important. All right, what do you think? Could life on Earth I should read this as statements. Life on Earth cannot exist without our oceans. Yeah. Nice. I think the oxygen one pretty much gave it away, but that's true. Not just because of the oxygen, although when we think about it, every second breath that we're breathing is coming from the oceans, but also because the oceans is what controls our, our cycles in different cycles on Earth, our weather and temperature patterns. And people around the world rely on our oceans for their livelihood. So 3 billion people have seafood as their primary source of protein. And so they need access to abundance of seafood to be able to feed their families, but also as a means of economic prosperity for them, for their own livelihoods and being able to sell these products out. And this is coming into play in the fact that we have historically and are currently overfishing. And a lot of places are finding those crashes in their availability of seafood or salmon, in whether it's from the ocean or from our streams, and feeling those repercussions there on their own lives. And last question, again, another easy one. Plastic pollution is one of the greatest threats to our ocean. Just one of. Yeah. Yes, we're all here, with SYC, UBC, WasteNauts. We're all very familiar with the plastic pollution problem. It's something that's come about really dramatically in the past 5-10 years, as being, really forefront of a problem that we are facing on a global level. So we know that plastic debris is killing millions of animals like seabirds and marine animals. All types of animals are eating, ingesting plastic. Microplastics are found in all around, like in the water column, on the seabed, in the deepest recesses of the ocean. And we have 8 billion kilograms of plastic that is getting added to our oceans every single year. And most of this is, there's the 5 most polluting rivers in the world. 4 of them are in Southeast Asia region, but we know that we are also sending our trash out to those areas. And then they're not being disposed of properly, either being burnt, so contributing to greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution, or they trying to be recycled, but then there's a lot of waste that's being created that is being sent out to landfills, or really just actually just ending up straight into our rivers and our oceans there. And huge gyres of rotating masses of plastic in our oceans. We know that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is twice the size of Texas. So it's great that there's all these wonderful technological advances looking into ways that we could be cleaning up our oceans. But I think at the core of it, we really need to rethink our relationship with plastic and the ways that we're using it, the ways that we're disposing of it, and how we might be able to. I love what you're doing, Rady, with the paddle boards. Thinking of ways that we could be repurposing plastic and making it part of a circular economy rather than that linear take, make, waste, and dispose. So there's all these plastic particles because we know plastic doesn't disappear, it doesn't biodegrade. When we say a bottle breaks down in 500 years, that's just our estimate, but we're saying it also just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, and we're getting lots of microplastics all around. So what happens with plastic pollutions is animals can get entangled up in it. So all those pieces ending up around their bodies, preventing them from being able to swim, preventing them from being able to go back up to the surface to breathe air. And so animals like sea turtles and dolphins and whales can drown. And so 100,000 marine animals and 1 million seabirds is estimated to be killed every year from ingesting and being entangled in plastic. And one really horrible thing we learned too is that plastic also binds to or absorbs toxic chemicals. So, and not only is plastic made with some extra toxic chemicals added to them to give them different types of characteristics, like being non-flammable or having certain like colors and scents, certain shapes and rigidity. But when they're in the marine environment, all these tiny pieces of microplastics are accumulating within them toxic chemicals. And then when animals ingest them, then it gets into their bodies too. And this can biomagnify up the food chain. And of course, we know that at the very top, we are also eating seafood. And so we are being directly impacted by this. So for me, it's very much like I care a lot about animals and our oceans, and knowing that it's really impacting them. But I find that this is something that a lot of people resonate with when they think of something that's really impacting them on an individual level. Like, oh, this is like, I love salmon and I love eating all the seafood. And to know that I'm ingesting little pieces of plastic from the seafood is quite poignant for people. However, I do want to point out that it's still at a very low levels, not something to be really concerned about. And in terms of being concerned, I would actually say I think most of the plastic that we're ingesting is from our environment directly. So our couches being made of plastic, little microplastics in the air that we breathe in and ingest, our clothes, and in our water that we drink. And especially if anyone drinks bottled water, that has really high levels of microplastics too. One animal I'd like to focus on in the discussion of the threats is the killer whale. And in particular, where I am in Vancouver, in the Salish Sea, we have a resident killer whale here called the southern resident. And there's only 74 of them left. So they're not a different species. Killer whales is all one species, but there's different ecotypes. That means that they have different dialects, so different languages, different behaviors. So the southern residents, they prefer to eat Chinook salmon, whereas you might have heard of some killer whales eating sharks. So those are the offshore killer whales. And they also really like eating like seals and other marine mammals like sea lions and sometimes other dolphins too. So the killer whale is the biggest of all the dolphin species. So even though it's called a whale, it's you can see kind of from its shape that it's actually a whale, sorry, a dolphin. And they're really highly intelligent beings. So they live up to 80 years. They have a more of a matriarchal society. So top female within the group. The children, their calf stays with them for much longer than is dependent, than they depend on them on, and they learn their behaviors and their culture from their mothers. But they're really big. They weigh up to 10,000 kilograms and eat 100 kilograms of food per day. So they can be a little bit food insecure when there's not enough of their prey around. And this is something that that researchers at UBC are actively looking into. They take a look, they're going out with drones, taking pictures of the killer whales. And when they see that their killer whales are getting really skinny, they actually feed that data back to the fisheries management, and they're trying to get them to shut down fisheries whenever the killer whales are looking skinny in the areas where their feeding zones are, to make sure that they have enough food available to them. So that's a really great way that research is actually having a direct implementation. Oftentimes with research, it's like you do your research, you find out the stats, and you publish a paper, and then that paper kind of gets taken up, or you have to like share news about it, write an article, and then it gets taken up by maybe through a policy level. But researchers now are doing more collaborations with industries so that they can actually be feeding that information back at a way faster pace, because especially when you only have 74 animals left, you can't wait until half of them die until you start reacting to an environmental change that is causing their death. So this is not just an issue for killer whales, but a lot of other animals too that are in competition with fisheries. One of the big issues that we have here is with herring. So if any of you want to learn a little bit more about that, the way that we are estimating how many herring, a type of fish, are in the ocean and how much we're thus consequently allowed to harvest is researchers at UBC think that it's actually not very accurate the way that they are calculating this, which means that if you're taking calculation where you say, hey, the sustainable amount that we can harvest is 20% of the population. And then every year, that means that we should have the same number. We can always take 20%, and that's called sustainable fishing, where you're always taking the amount that is sustainable and going to keep it at level. However, herring populations have been going down every year, because if we're overestimating how many we have and then saying we're taking 20%, that can actually end up being a much larger percentage, and then they're not able to recover each year that many individuals, which is a threat to lots of other animals that rely on herring as their food source, which is the case in BC with wolves and foxes and eagles and sea lions. A big threat for killer whales is also like physical disturbance from boats. So there's a huge number of collisions that happen with big ships and all the whales and marine mammals that come up to the surface to breathe. But with dolphins in particular, they use something called echolocation to navigate and be able to see underwater. And when there's the sound disturbance from boats, so from their motors, but also from sonar. So when shipping vessels are looking for schools of fish, they're emitting sonar, so there's little sound waves that can bounce back, and then they're able to visualize their environment. Military ships do that too, and of course research ships do also, except that research vehicles would be doing it likely a little bit less, and for a particular reason, and likely in an area that might be impacting whales a little bit less. But this is hugely disturbing for them because animals will actively be leaving areas where there is this sound and where there are a lot of boats. There's a really cool visual, I don't have it here, but it's of the major shipping routes in the world. So between, you know, us and China and like the US up to us too, there's all these ships that come by all the time. And then there's this cool visual of a whale trying to, that's GPS tagged, and you can see that every time they get towards a major shipping route that they leave really immediately in the opposite direction. And it's almost like an impenetrable zone for them because it's so dangerous and so disturbing. Killer whales as a top predator also have the huge threat of environmental contamination, because contaminants, they biomagnify up the food chain. So they might enter the food chain from a zooplankton that's eating little particles and then ingests toxic chemicals. Then little fish eat those zooplankton, bigger fish eat those little fish. A sea lion will eat that bigger fish, and the killer whale eats the sea lion. And we know that now orcas around the world, not just the southern residents, are really threatened by when there's leftover industrial chemicals from mines, from waste that they've added there. And when it rains, if that hasn't been disposed of properly, that's ending up in the waterways in really high amounts, ending up in the oceans, and then getting up into the food chain and into the bodies of the killer whales. This is an issue for their survival, but more so their reproduction. So they're not having as many babies as they naturally would because of the disruption in their hormone cycles. And this is a huge loss in terms of us trying to recover their populations, because we want to keep them healthy so that they have more offspring, want to make sure that they have enough food. But there's so many other things threatening them, preventing them from being able to reproduce adequately. And lastly, over here, we also have these toxic spills that we get from offshore oil rigs or from ships getting hull crash, and big oil spills that are spreading across large areas. And it's really wonderful that when there is an oil spill, there's a huge response, a huge teams that go and clean it up, and they'll go and wash the marine mammals and seabirds that they find that are covered in these. But there's still that huge repercussion, and it's quite far away sometimes where these things can happen. And the response, even though it is fast, sometimes it's not really fast enough, and these persist in the environment still. But it's really great for us to know what's threatening our oceans so that we're educated, but we also want to take action. And that's one thing that I felt a lot on a personal level, learning about all the threats. And I'm not talking about it today, but with climate change, with our biodiversity crisis, and it's easy to feel really overwhelmed and think, like, I can't even engage with this material right now because it's so heartbreaking. But when you actually take that knowledge and then do something about it, and really make that clear to yourself, you're like, okay, because I know this and because I feel so strongly about this, this is what I'm doing. All of that adds up. And I love this quote over here of Adela. One says, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. And even though maybe on an individual level, you think, what's the difference? Like, what's the difference that I can personally make? Every little bit adds up, but also everything that you do, you're inspiring other people to do too. The people around you, you're role modeling to them no matter what. That's why you become so similar to your friends, because you adopt each other's behaviors. So if you choose to do something, then others are going to follow suit also. So in terms of the things that we talked about with the killer whales in terms of threats, one way that you can be helping is to report sightings. So I made this quite BC focused. Apologies to people in Ontario and Quebec. But yes, there's the BC Cetacean Sightings Network that you can go and report the sightings that you've had. And any marine mammal incidents that you report, there's a number that you can call there too, if you see an animal that's injured or entangled up in debris. But for everyone, there's all types of citizen science that you can get involved in. I would recommend checking out like SciStarter or just looking up like citizen science and like the name of your city and see what you can be involved in. It's a really great way to get experience too, but oftentimes it's a wonderful way to be contributing to when we have more data, more knowledge, then we can make better decisions and we can use the power of people coming together to do that. There's all these boater awareness campaigns going around, and this is something that you can be a part of too, educating people, because a lot of people, recreational boaters, that often happens that they're going too close to marine mammals, thinking like, oh, it's fine, like it's just one person. But what you're actually doing is you're preventing them from being able to forage efficiently. They're going a certain way and they have to move out of the way for that. And if they're already food insecure, adding that extra stress to them and that extra distance and them feeling the need to circumnavigate, that could even prevent them from even going to their food sources for that day. So there's this, the MER Society has a slogan, see a below, go slow, because it's not just dangerous for the animals, like yes, they're getting really harmed, but even for recreational boaters, if again, that individual motivation there, if people only care about themselves, you can also mention that with boats, like they can damage their boat and that'll be a huge cost to them and for their own safety. So some of us might be vegan, vegetarian, but if we do eat seafood, we can try to opt for sustainable seafood whenever we can. So there's different labels that you might find for sustainable seafood. This is one that we have here, Oceanwise, and they have a whole list of, you can go and check it out. They have a guide of what type of seafoods are sustainable. And when you go out to restaurants or shop for seafood, then looking for those labels is really important. However, they're not all created equal. So Oceanwise also has a list of the different providers of sustainable seafood, like the ones who give their check mark and say like, yes, this is sustainable. Because some of them say that, but they actually have really low, really not very strict policies as to when they say that something is sustainable or not. So that's another thing that you can check. What I want to mention here is that this is going to cost you more money. And I know it's really hard as a student. You're thinking, you know, these are like, maybe these are not funds that I have available to me right now. And that's totally fine. If this is not something that fits with your life, don't force it. Because at the end of the day, if you want some changes that you make to be sustainable in themselves, as in they work with your life and you are going to continue doing them. Or otherwise, if you keep starting something and stopping, and then maybe you won't start again in the future because you say like, I tried that and it didn't work. So find something that actually works with where you are right now. But unfortunately, with a lot of these sustainable options, and no matter what we do that in our lives that is sustainable, oftentimes it does take more resources, like it costs more, and it's more time input for it. Because when we think of things that are destructive, the reason we do them is because it's the easy way. It's quick, it's easy, it's fast, you know, it's cheap. And that's the mentality that we've gotten into around our world. And so I do want to caution us and ask, you know, for us to kind of change that mentality that we have a little bit. Think about slowing down, think about putting more time in, think about where do you want to spend your money. And yes, this costs more, but maybe I can take that from something else that I'm constantly purchasing, and then make this part of my routine. And then lastly, for solutions with the killer whales, be careful about what you put down your drain. So, there's lots of industrial toxic waste, and we can work towards avoiding that through petitions and activism. But on an individual level, we can also influence what's going down our drain. So a really easy switch is, using baking soda and vinegar at home, switching your cleaning products. This is a way that you can clean out your drains. So I actually have a little drain stopper, like a little mesh that I put, because I have really long and thick hair. And I used to clog my drain all the time. And I used to use drain cleaner all the time, and I feel so bad thinking back to it. But now I just have this little stopper there, so every day I just pull out the hairs in my shower, and whenever I do need to, I put boiling water and baking soda and vinegar down the drain, just to kind of make sure that it's not getting clogged at all. It's more of like a preventative measure, knowing that these ingredients are safe for the environment. So yes, we can all help protect the ocean. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the small changes we can make. But I also want to think of those lifestyle changes. So trying to cook at home when we can, or if we are getting food out, dining in, slowing down and dining in, and thinking about bringing all the things you need when you go out. So I always, pack extra like fruit in my bag. And bring some crackers or something, just so that I know if I need food, then I'm not going to have to buy something that's going to be packaged. And with our clothes, we want to be moving from fast fashion, thinking of purchasing items like that are, look nice right now, whereas they don't really last long, and they're not made to last. They're made really cheaply. And instead invest in things that are going to be really, really high quality. And in the long term, that can also help you save funds. So you spend more initially, but then you're investing in things that you can keep for a really long time. So this is maybe just a little example here. This is a wool sweater I got from Icebreaker. And I wanted to buy a wool sweater the other day, but I realized it was super, super thin, and that it would stretch out really easily. Whereas this one is really thick, and it's gotten like some tiny little holes that I've tried to like sew up. And that's part of my change in my life, of making those small changes there. Lots of zero waste markets. So maybe can you write in the chat right now, are there any zero waste markets that you go and shop at? And you can share these with others. Because I have over here Nada and Soap Dispensary. You can write those if that's somewhere you go to. Don't worry if someone else already wrote it. I just want to see the kinds of places that you have heard of, or that you go to. And maybe if some of you are from Quebec and Ontario, maybe writing in brackets if you're like, you could say BC, Quebec, or the city that you're in, so people know, hey, that's where I am. Oh, cool. At least you shop in Nada too. Nice. Yeah, local farmers markets. That's a really great place to go, Sam. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, the soap dispensary is awesome because you can get all your shampoos and your conditioners and your soaps all in like liquid form if you still really like that, but at least you get it in bulk. And if anyone has any other resources, please feel free, go ahead and throw them in the chat over there. And organize and participate in a shoreline cleanup. And if you do, make sure there's like the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup. You can upload the data, like how many of cigarette butts did you find, how many like plastic pieces. And you can also, if you find anything that has a logo on it, like a Starbucks cup or a Snickers bar, you can take a picture of that too. And there's different apps, or if you just want to put it on your social media, and you can call out to those companies. And that helps push for that change too on that small level. And of course, please, when you are working on these things, no matter where you are in your journey, you're always learning, but you're always at a place maybe at a different level of someone else. So you can teach others about what you're doing, even if it's small, even if you don't think like, oh, I'm not living fully like sustainably, and like I know that person over there who completely is living off the grid. It's like no matter where you are, there are things that you can help and teach others. So please do, because that's what helps create that movement. But on a large level, so those are a lot of individual changes we can make. We want to be influencing change on a provincial, on a federal level. We want to be supporting organizations that are actually protecting areas, marine protected areas, or are requesting policy or law changes in that relate to our oceans or any other environmental issues that you care about. So for example, this was a petition by EcoJustice asking for a change for killer whales. But it's not all doom and gloom. For the particular Southern residents that I was talking about, they just recently had a new baby. So a new calf was born, and this is really good news. We want to celebrate whenever we do have these good news stories, when we manage to add a protected area, when you know, a stricter law comes into place that helps us reduce the amount of toxic chemicals that industries are allowed to put out as waste, because it's a long journey that we have to get to a place where we are living in a sustainable world. And so each time we do want to celebrate where we are and mix that doom that we're feeling of, oh, all these things are so difficult and really challenging to reach, but each little step of the way is a celebration towards that journey. All right, so I'm going to leave us on this resources page for a little while. If you'd like to take a screenshot or write them down really quickly. And also, if you can please write in the chat any resources that you like, any groups that you follow, maybe some Instagram pages or some websites or some YouTube videos that you really love, please put them in the chat. This is an opportunity for all of us to share. And I'm sure the organizers can also copy in that and put in an email out for everyone as a resource. So some of them here, these two on the left are more educational based. So OceanWise is really great to go and learn a lot more. There's some courses there that you can take too. If any of you are below the age of 30, OceanWise also has a really cool program called Ocean Bridge. And it's, I believe, a year-long program, and they do a trip, and it's all about taking action to protect our oceans. So please take a look at that program if that's something you're really keen on. And Oceans Networks Canada also has something called a Digital Fisher, which is a bit of a citizen science program there, but also lots of really great learning resources. If you want to take a little more action, you want to sign those petitions, you want to volunteer and help support, take more of an activist role, check out the David Suzuki Foundation, CPAWS, and the Georgia Strait Alliance. Georgia Strait Alliance is really awesome at providing information too, but also really action-based. But I think they're BC-based for those of you in the East. That's why if anyone wants to share those extra ones in the chat, that would be great. And this is a list of Instagram groups that I follow, and I found that I really love the kinds of content that they share out. And the Marine Detective is one that just really like fun information about marine animals. And I really enjoy kind of learning, you know, having a mix in my own newsfeed of what I'm looking at, a mix of, okay, these are things that are like, oh, these are like threats, and they're kind of really focusing more on challenges that we're facing, but also following a few of these fun things and knowing like, wow, how beautiful our oceans are, and this is why I'm working towards protecting it. This is why it's so important for us to all do that. Okay, so thank you everyone. That was the end of my session for today, but we have a Q&A coming up where I'm really excited to hear all your questions and have a chat with you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Corvalan. That was awesome. I think I definitely learned a lot. I can say for the audience as well, I think there was a lot of valuable information in there. I personally really agree with the fact that like making sustainable change in your life can be hard, but just making sure that the changes you're making are sustainable for you. Because I think a lot of these ideas are awesome, but they're not sustainable for a lot of people in the long term, which can be discouraging. But thank you so much. I'll just share my screen so we can move on to the discussion part of the presentation. Sorry, 1 second.
I will now stop recording just so everyone knows, because we're not recording for privacy reasons, the Q&A. And also we're gonna be making a list of resources, so any that you throw in there will make it. And yeah, we're currently asking about the slides, so we'll get back to you, Megan. Thank you, sorry.
No worries. Can everyone see the discussion slide?